Is it possible for just a normal person to become rich? I'm just a normal guy living in a normal house in a normal neighborhood, working a normal desk job. I don't drive perhaps a normal type car, but perhaps that's another video for another day. But the truth is I'm actively working towards growing my wealth over time as I navigate through life. I can't exactly say I'm rich in wealth right now, but I'm certainly moving in the right direction. My investment portfolio looks pretty healthy, and I've recently agreed the purchase of my first buy-to-let property to start building out my own property portfolio. But more on that a little later in the video. So today I wanted to share with you guys the financial model that I'm currently following, which has allowed me to significantly grow my wealth over the past few years with the tools that I currently have at my disposal. And I'll share all of this so hopefully you guys can achieve the same too, if not more, regardless of how much money you've got to begin with. Now, of course, quick disclaimer, this model isn't going to be for everybody, nor is it probably the best model out there in terms of financial management. But it's certainly one that's working for me so far, and it's one that I'm comfortable to talk about based on my own experiences, which is what this channel is all about, around sharing my own personal successes and failures along the way. So with that said, let's talk about the model. So it's not going to be a model that's going to generate you millions of pounds within 12 months, but it will be a model that if you take consistent action over time, it will allow you to build a significant amount of wealth. But in order to get to that level of wealth, first it's important to know where most people go wrong first. So I've whipped up a model on Procreate on my iPad, which demonstrates that most people treat their finances like a bucket of water. And it's a model that shows that your income flows through the top right the way into the bucket, which creates your liquidity pool. And your liquidity ends up being filtered straight out from the bottom of the bucket because you've got a massive hole in it, which is also known as your expenses. Now, of course, you can decide to either keep that expenses hole shut or open it up and let all of the liquidity drain out of it. But unfortunately, that's where most people go wrong, because 34% of people here in the UK live paycheck to paycheck. And over in the US, it's even worse, with 58% of people living paycheck to paycheck. It means people are getting paid from their job on a monthly basis, their liquidity pool builds up, they spend all of their money throughout the course of their month through expenses, and then they do the same thing again and again and again. And usually it's because people are trying to impress their friends in order to boost their own self-esteem, from having a fancy car, perhaps an expensive watch, and a house leaving them in crippling amounts of debt. It is unfortunately that endless cycle of earning money in order to sustain a lifestyle, but without building any form of true wealth. And that unfortunately is a huge financial mistake that most people fall into, especially people perhaps in their 20s and perhaps even their early 30s. And some people go all the way through life living like this. So if you don't want to go down this path and you don't want to have a constantly draining bucket, then what I'm going to show you next is the wealth machine, which is going to give you a slightly different perspective about what you should do with your finances. So here is the new concept, with two new elements added to it. Firstly, we've got the investment flywheel down at the bottom, and then we've got the passive income tube, which feeds back into your liquidity pool. So I'm sure you can probably see where this is going already. But for some context, here's how I've actually set up my own personal finances in order to maximize my future net worth. Now, obviously, the first important point to point out is that the more money that flows in the top via your income gives you the higher propensity to generate more wealth over time. So for me personally, this is where I have my 9 to 5 job, where I just work a normal desk job, but it's also where I have my side hustle too, in the form of this YouTube channel. But the average millionaire has roughly about 7 streams of income, and as you guys can see there, well, as of right now, it looks like I only have 2. But I'll explain where some of the other income streams come from in just a moment's time, which will probably be the things that allow me to obtain millionaire status. But first, let's talk about my income. My personal income pays for all of my personal expenses in the form of my car, my house, and holidays and all that good stuff. But what's critical to point out is that I close my expenses tap off, and I always have a minimum of 12 months worth of expenses always held within my liquidity pool, just in case I find myself in a slightly more difficult spot in life. That is what's also more commonly referred to as an emergency fund. Then from my liquidity pool and from my leftover disposable income, I can then open my investments lever, which is where I aim to invest roughly 20% of my post-tax income into a stocks and shares ISA account, which I currently have over on Trading 212. So all of my investments, I have roughly a combined portfolio value of about £48,000. And to share with you guys the breakdown, they're split across individual stocks, predominantly on Trading 212, an S&P 500 ETF, along with some cryptocurrency as well. And from my equity investments, I get paid something called dividends, which is a portion of a company's profits which are paid out to shareholders. And as of right now, to give you guys an example, my S&P 500 ETF, which I currently have, actually pays me out a dividend yield of 1.34%, which works out to be roughly about £252 per year. So those investments are creating me passive income, which is then going back into my liquidity pool, which is great because it's topping up my overall income that I haven't had to earn. And therefore it gives me then the opportunity to then reinvest that money, which then creates more passive income, which then continues to increase my liquidity. And it's kind of like a snowball effect from there. Now, all of that has pretty much been achieved just from working my normal 9-to-5 job. But the next bit, as I've found out, is where you're really going to accelerate your wealth. And that's through starting a business or a side hustle. It's the 5 till 9 after the 9 till 5. There was a paper written by the Harvard Business Review back in about 2017, which was actually headlined that even senior executives need a side hustle. The reason being, it's a hedge against the things that are fundamentally out of your control. If we enter a recession or a new financial crisis turns up, then you might not be safe within your current job. And therefore, in my opinion, it's always super important to always have a financial plan B. Because unfortunately, like we can see in this model, if the income tap gets turned off, invariably the expenses tap still stays on. So having that side hustle certainly gives you an added layer of security, but I certainly don't want to look at this just from a defensive point of view, because when things are growing great, it can certainly give you huge financial advantages. So here's exactly how it works for me. YouTube pays me through AdSense, and I also get paid some affiliate commissions when you guys click links down in the description below. So first things first, a massive thank you for you guys for supporting the channel. Now, obviously from that income, I of course have some business expenses, but the reality is I'm running a very high profit margin business, which I pretty much do completely from home. I don't have a studio, I don't have any staff, I have very little overhead whatsoever. So as a result, I've been able to save up my retained income to the point where I've put myself in a position where I'm now able to open up another investment arm of this business. That investment arm being, as I said at the start of the video, is buying a buy-to-let property, which I've recently secured for £112,000. This is another asset which will increase in value roughly about 5% per year based on historical averages. But it will also pay me passive income too in the form of my tenants paying rent, which will generate me an additional top-line revenue of about £800 per month. Now, it goes without saying that investing in property is a lower profit margin business because we have more expenses, especially during today's climate with high interest rates. But nonetheless, profit is profit, and that profit will go back into my liquidity pool, which hopefully over time will allow me to then actually go on to buy more properties over time. And the best thing about these investments is that you can generate an income that you don't necessarily have to work too much for. So I encourage every single one of you guys out there who isn't making money on top of their normal 9-to-5 job to do so. Find something that you're passionate about or interested in and figure out what the pain points and problems are in the marketplace, and then come up with a solution to solve them. Because once you get started, you never know where you're going to end up. There are plenty of case studies out there where people have simply just started a side hustle to help generate them a bit of extra cash at the end of the month, and they've turned out to be businesses that have generated life-changing amounts of money. So this is my financial model and how I'm set up to currently maximize my own net worth during this time. Of course, one day I would love to perhaps quit my 9-to-5 job and do YouTube full time and build out a property empire. So be sure to smash a like on this video in order to help the cause. But for now, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and I'll see where I end up. So if you enjoyed this video, guys, the YouTube algorithm recommends that you click on this video next. With that said, see you over in the next one.